My name is Lily, and believe me, it took me a while to even say that much in English without feeling my heart race and my hands get clammy. You see, I wasn't always this comfortable speaking English. In fact, there was a time when speaking even a single sentence out loud felt like standing on a stage in front of thousands of people, under the brightest lights, with no way to escape. But let me take you back to where it all began, because there's a story here, one I think you might just find yourself in, too. Have you ever felt a tiny bit of fear when you had to say something in front of others, especially in a language that wasn't your own? Imagine that fear multiplied, so strong that it even stops you from saying hello or goodbye. That was me. For years, I avoided speaking English at all costs, even if it meant I had to miss out on friendships, interesting conversations, and sometimes even opportunities. I would sit silently in classrooms, pretending to understand but often feeling completely lost. My friends would laugh and chat freely, while I stayed back, a silent observer in my own life. Then one day, everything changed. It was like life gave me a small, gentle push and whispered, "It's time." That day, I remember sitting in a small cafe, sipping my usual cup of coffee, just a little too afraid to ask the barista for anything more than just coffee. Please, I glanced around, feeling that familiar pang of loneliness and frustration. A group of people nearby was laughing, talking loudly in English. I couldn't help but wonder, what's so funny? What are they talking about? What would it feel like to be part of that world? But I still didn't have the courage to join in. The fear was still there, as real as ever. You might wonder why someone would be so afraid of a language, of simple words, of the sounds we use to communicate every day. But that's the thing about fear, it doesn't always make sense. And my fear of speaking English felt as big as a mountain, even though everyone around me seemed to climb it so easily. One day, something in me just clicked. I looked in the mirror and told myself, "Lily, you're not going to live like this anymore." That was the day I made a promise I was going to learn to speak English, really speak it, without holding back. It wouldn't matter if I made mistakes, if people laughed, or if I stumbled over words. I would keep going. I wanted to be able to walk into a room and introduce myself without feeling like I was going to faint. I wanted to laugh with friends, share stories, and, most of all, I wanted to feel free. As I started this journey, I realized something amazing. I wasn't alone. There were so many people around me who felt the same way. And each time I struggled with a new word or practiced a phrase over and over, it felt like a small victory. It was a lot like climbing a mountain, hard and exhausting, but worth every step. And then, one day, something magical happened. I was walking down the street, and I saw an older woman struggling to carry her grocery bags. Without thinking, I rushed over and said, "Do you need help?" It wasn't perfect, but it was English. She looked up at me, smiled warmly, and said, "Yes, thank you, dear." In that moment, I felt something I had never felt before: pride. I had used my words to help someone, and it felt like the whole world had opened up in front of me. That was the moment I realized how powerful language could be. English wasn't just a set of rules or strange sounds, it was a bridge, a way to connect with people I might have never been able to know before. Each time I spoke, each time I dared to reach out, that bridge grew stronger. I was no longer just a silent observer, I was part of the world. You might wonder why this story matters. Why should you keep listening? Maybe, just maybe, you have a mountain you're afraid to climb too. Maybe it's speaking in English, or maybe it's something else entirely. But if you keep going, if you take each step, even the small ones, you might just find a whole new world waiting for you too. As days went on, I kept trying to speak, and little by little, I felt my confidence grow. I wasn't completely fearless, far from it, but I started to see how my words had value. There was one moment in particular that I'll never forget. I was in a store, trying to find a birthday card for my mom, and I couldn't find the right section. Usually, I just keep looking quietly until I figured it out on my own. But that day, I walked up to the clerk, took a deep breath, and said, "Excuse me, where are the birthday cards?" The young woman behind the counter gave me the biggest smile. She didn't laugh at my accent or my nervous tone, she just pointed me in the right direction and even helped me pick one out. It was such a simple thing, just a few words, but it felt like I had opened a door. And I knew that once a door like that opens, you can never truly go back to the way things were before. Each conversation, each sentence was making me braver. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when I would say something wrong, and people would give me puzzled looks. Sometimes they'd even laugh, which made me want to crawl back into my shell. On those days, I'd question why I was even bothering. Why not just stay quiet and avoid the embarrassment? But then I'd think about all the moments I was missing, the friendships, the shared laughter, the stories. I'd remember that feeling of helping the woman with her groceries and the pride that came with it. And so, even when it was tough, I kept going. I had a friend named Emma who was always so patient with me. She was a native English speaker, and she could tell that I was trying hard to improve. She'd listen carefully as I stumbled over words, never interrupting, always encouraging me to keep going. One evening, we went out for coffee, and she looked at me with a warm smile and said, "Lily, you've come so far. Do you realize that I hadn't thought about it that way?" But in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Emma saw the progress that I hadn't even noticed in myself. One day, Emma invited me to a gathering at her house. There were people from all over, each one speaking fluently, filling the room with stories and laughter. I could feel my heart beating faster, that old fear bubbling up inside me. Part of me wanted to just find a corner and listen, but then I thought about all the little steps I'd taken. This was the chance to take another one. I walked up to a group, took a deep breath, and joined the conversation. At first, my words felt clumsy, like a child learning to walk. But then something incredible happened. People started to listen. They laughed at my jokes, nodded at my stories, and in that moment, I felt like I was truly part of the group. It's funny how language can transform you, not just in how you speak, but in how you see yourself. Each time I spoke, it felt like I was peeling away layers of fear, getting closer to the real me. There was a warmth, a closeness that I hadn't known was possible before. My world, which once felt so small, was now bursting with color and sound. I could share my thoughts, express my feelings, and let people truly see me. Sometimes, though, fear would still find its way back. One day, I had to give a presentation at work. I remember standing there, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, as I looked out at all the faces waiting for me to speak. The old fear whispered in my ear, reminding me of all the mistakes I'd made before. But then I looked over and saw Emma sitting in the audience, giving me a thumbs up. That small gesture filled me with a courage I didn't know I had. I took a deep breath, and as I started speaking, I felt something amazing happen. The fear started to fade. My voice grew stronger, steadier, and for the first time, I felt in control. When the presentation was over, my colleagues clapped. Some even came up to me afterward, saying they hadn't known I could speak so confidently. I laughed, realizing that I hadn't known it either. But that's the thing about courage, you never really know how much you have until you're standing at the edge, ready to take that leap. After that, everything felt different. I started reaching out to people more, talking to strangers, making new friends. I even started to dream in English, which felt like a strange but beautiful victory. It was as if my mind was finally accepting this new part of me, letting go of the fear and embracing something new. One day, as I was walking through the park, I saw a little girl sitting by herself, looking sad. Without hesitation, I went up to her and asked, "Are you okay?" She looked up at me with big, tearful eyes and said, "I lost my mommy." I took her hand and reassured her, "Don't worry. Let's find her together." We walked around, and as I spoke to her, telling her little stories to make her feel better, I realized that English had become more than just a language to me. It was a way to connect, to comfort, to share kindness. When we found her mom, the woman hugged her daughter tightly and looked at me with gratitude. She thanked me, and as I walked away, I felt a warmth spread through me. It was a simple moment, but it felt like everything I'd been working toward was finally coming together. As I walked away from the park that day, a sense of peace settled over me. I realized that I had crossed a line, a quiet but powerful line that divided my old self from the person I was becoming. My days of silence and shyness were fading, replaced by this newfound courage that seemed to grow stronger with each word I spoke. It was as if, with every conversation, I was unlocking a part of me that had been hidden for so long. And yet, I knew my journey was far from over. One evening, Emma invited me to a volunteer event at a community center. I was a little nervous about going, as it meant meeting even more new people, but the idea of connecting with others was exciting, too. When we arrived, the room was buzzing with activity, filled with people of all ages and backgrounds. Emma explained that the center offered language classes, job training, and support for newcomers. As we walked around, I saw people struggling with the same fears I had once known so well. They were learning to say simple phrases, repeating words with shaky voices, their faces a mix of determination and doubt. Suddenly, one of the instructors approached me. "We're short-staffed today. Would you mind helping out with the English class for beginners?" My heart skipped a beat. Me? Teaching English? Just months ago, I had been the one terrified of saying the simplest sentences. But then I thought about everything I had gone through, all the fear, the small victories, the moments when I had pushed through my own doubts. Maybe this was my chance to give back, to help someone else find the courage to speak. I agreed, and soon I found myself standing in front of a small group of learners. I could see the nervousness in their eyes, the same look I used to have. I started by introducing myself, telling them a little about my own journey and the challenges I had faced. "Believe me," I said, smiling, "if I can do this, so can you." They laughed, and I felt the tension in the room ease. We went over simple phrases, practicing introductions and common greetings. I noticed one man who kept looking down, barely whispering his words. After class, I approached him and said, "I know it's hard. I was just like you not long ago. But trust me, every word you say makes you stronger." He looked up, surprised, and nodded slowly. In that moment, I felt a deep connection, a sense that my struggles had brought me to this very place, this very purpose. As I left the center that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My journey was no longer just about me, it had become something bigger, something that connected me to others who were also finding their voices. I knew I had a lot to learn, but now I was also a guide, someone who could offer the kind of encouragement that Emma had given me. It was a beautiful feeling, one that filled me with a new kind of courage. The weeks went by, and I continued volunteering at the center. Each session, I saw the learners becoming braver, their voices a little stronger, their eyes a little brighter. And with each class, I felt myself growing too. I started sharing more of my story, telling them about the times I had felt lost, the times I had stumbled and doubted myself. And they shared their stories with me, their dreams, their fears, their hopes for a better future. One day, a young woman named Anna came up to me after class. She had been one of the quietest in the group, rarely speaking above a whisper. But that day, she looked at me with a new light in her eyes. "Lily," she said softly, "I want to thank you. You made me believe that I could do this. I've been afraid of speaking for so long, but watching you has given me hope." Her words touched me deeply. I hugged her, feeling the weight of her gratitude and knowing exactly what it meant. As I walked home that evening, I thought about how far I had come. English was no longer just a language for me, it was a bridge, a connection, a way to bring people together. It was something that had changed me from the inside out, giving me the strength to reach out, to share, and to build friendships that I had once thought were impossible. But life, as it always does, had more surprises in store. One morning, I received a message from a friend of Emma's who worked at a company looking for someone bilingual. She told me that they needed someone who could not only speak English, but also understand the challenges of learning it. "I thought of you immediately," she said. The thought of working in a place where I could help others in their language journey was thrilling, but also terrifying. Could I really do this? Could I really use my English skills in a professional setting? I decided to take the leap and applied for the position. The interview was scheduled for the following week, and every day leading up to it, I practiced speaking in front of the mirror, rehearsing my answers, trying to steady my nerves. I thought about everything I had been through, all the fears I had overcome, and told myself that this was just another step on my journey. The day of the interview arrived, and as I walked into the office, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The interviewer was kind, asking me about my background, my experiences, and why I wanted the job. I spoke openly, telling her about my own struggles with learning English and how it had changed my life. I shared my passion for helping others, for building connections, and for creating a supportive environment for people who, like me, had once felt lost. After what felt like an eternity, the interview ended. I walked out of the building feeling a strange sense of peace. Whether I got the job or not, I knew that I had given it my all, that I had spoken my truth and shared my journey honestly. A few days later, I received the call. They wanted to offer me the position. I was overjoyed, barely able to believe that this opportunity was real. I was going to work in a place where I could make a difference, where my struggles and my growth would be valuable. This was more than just a job, it was a chance to give back, to help others find the same courage I had found. My journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. There were still challenges ahead, new words to learn, new situations to navigate. But for the first time, I felt truly ready to face them. Each step, each conversation, each connection had brought me to this point. And as I stood there, holding that offer letter, I realized that this journey had only just begun.